I'm Mackenzie, and this is Our Voices, a TV program by young adults for young adults, discussing issues that are important to us.
I'm Skylar.
And I'm Jackson.
In this episode, we have heard the term transgender, but what does it mean? And who are people who classify as transgender? Almost each week, we hear of another mass shooting incident. Would you know what to do to stay alive? Extraterrestrials, aliens, and ET. Is there life in the galaxy waiting to be discovered? And we'll get the history of same-sex marriage and how it became legalized. So the term transgender can be interpreted many different ways. In your professional opinion, how would you define the term?
Excellent question. Transgender, actually by definition, encompasses a couple of different things. Number one, it is an individual that expresses himself or herself opposite the gender that he was or she was assigned at birth. So for instance, a young girl that was born as a little girl will express herself as a boy. That can be in various ways, whether it be in her demeanor, the way she dresses, etc. In addition, transgender will also include people that feel that it is actually a third gender. So it's not just male or female. They feel transgender. Lastly, transgender will also include the individual who actually expresses both genders, male and female. This is what he or she expresses.
When it comes to a person being transgender, when do you think an individual might begin to ask themselves a question like that?
It's a question loaded with regards to development. Therefore, children, when the studies have looked at it, have identified their sexual preference or even their desire to express their preference as young as within few months. So you might think, how is that? Well, for instance, the 12-month-old or 18-month-old who is born again as a little girl may prefer to play with cars as opposed to with a doll, may prefer to climb trees as opposed to play house. So quite frankly, it can be evident at a very young age, much younger than before an individual can express his or her sexual preference.
Okay. When it comes to an individual being transgender, what are some of the psychological effects that it could take on the individual or someone that is associated with the individual?
Excellent. Well, when we look at how it impacts an individual and from a mental health standpoint, if it's something we call ego dystonic, which means that it causes quite a bit of controversy within the individual, whether it be because of cultural upbringing or society, that can include some psychological or psychiatric issues to the individual, whether it be depression, anxiety, even substance abuse, and therefore possibility of increases in morbidity, mortality, or suicidality. So it can be very much a negative factor if the individual does not feel accepted. Prime examples of some individuals that we have heard about on the media that are openly transgender are, for instance, Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, as well as, for instance, Chaz Bono. Those would probably be the most prevalent examples. But fortunately, as a society, we've gotten better about accepting individuals and talking more openly about issues such as being transgender.
It was nice to hear from a professional standpoint what the term transgender actually means, because me personally, I was never completely aware of the psychological effects it could have on that person as well as the people around them.
I always thought that transgender meant that you wanted to be the opposite sex. Just like if I was a girl, I just wanted to be a guy. But really, it's more than that. It's someone could want to be the opposite sex, or they could want to perceive as both boy and girl, or it could be that there's a third option, that they wanted to be transgender, not a boy or a girl. They just wanted to be them.
A transgender individual used to be such a big deal, and there's still a lot of controversy surrounding it, but like it's becoming more acceptable per se. Like Laverne Cox from Orange Is the New Black, she was nominated for an Emmy, and Chad Bono just competed on Dancing with the Stars a few seasons ago. And I just think that's really cool that people are becoming more accepting of those individuals.
And even with the whole bathroom situation that we hear of in the news quite often, I believe, because once someone goes through the process of getting changed, I don't understand like the law saying you have to go to the bathroom of the restroom that you're born with, the gender you're born with. But if someone goes through that entire process and now they look completely different, I feel like they need to go to the bathroom that, you know, that they look like and they identify as, because it might make other people feel uncomfortable if, say, you were born a man but get the change to become a female. Why would you still have to use the male bathroom? It would make other people feel uncomfortable in that situation. So I feel like you said, the more people become aware of it and the more you see it on the news and the media and TV shows, the more people are going to become more accepting of it.
Yeah, like over in Europe, actually, this isn't so common in America, though from what I've heard, it is pretty common up north. You know, but in Europe, they have a semi-solution to the problem, where instead they have unisex bathrooms, so male, female, and then unisex. So in other words, a bathroom that pretty much just anybody can walk into.
That would actually really help the situation, I feel like, because then it doesn't put a limitation on, well, if you're female, you use this, and if you're male, you this one, because those people who identify as both or whichever, they feel more comfortable using it, because then they don't have to, you know, defend themselves. Well, I'm transgender, so then they just can use whichever one they feel like it, or use the unisex one.
One of the most tragic mass shootings in U.S. history happened in our backyard at a nightclub in Orlando. Would you know what to do if you were faced with this type of danger? How would you protect yourself and your friends?
I feel like the more you just watch all of your surroundings and always be aware of your choices, just in case something does happen, the more people are going to be prepared just in case something does happen like this.
I've noticed that with the shootings that have been happening and continue to happen, people are starting to come up with plans if that were to happen to them in a certain situation. And while I think it's a good idea to have a plan, you can never fully prepare for a situation like that, because it's just a matter of what's going on in the spur of the moment.
What we'd like for people to do and keep in mind is three things: run, hide, or fight. So keeping that in mind, when you get to the establishment, you want to look around. Where's the exits? How many exits are there? How many rooms are in the establishment? Where could you go to hide if you need to? So that's the first thing we want to see is people being aware.
Like they said in the interview, run, hide, or fight. It's just going to be whenever that moment happens, you might think, oh, I'm prepared for this, but you might, once that situation happens, your adrenaline's going to be going and you might forget that plan. So you have to consider those three options: just run, hide, or fight.
How can they get out? That's what we want to see first. Get out safely. Take as many people with you that you can, if it's possible. Again, depending on the location, it may not be. If there's one or two points of entry or exit, they may not be able to do that. But that's the first thing we want to see happen. If you can get out, get out. Don't worry about belongings. Don't worry about anything you leave behind. Try to get people to go with you, and if you can get out safely, do so. Then when you're outside, a couple things to keep in mind. Try not to let anybody back in the building. So while you're out there, now you're trying to prevent anybody else from going into a potentially deadly situation. And then you want to get on the phone immediately with 911.
When I was in school, at least, we used to do drills where we prepared for situations like that, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane or a shooting situation or something. We've always practiced either, depending on the situation, we practice locking the doors or going to the biggest room or area in the facility, and we would just lock the doors and huddle in a corner and hide.
The next thing is going to be to hide. Keeping in mind, if you're doing that, you want to barricade doors with whatever means necessary. If it means putting tables or chairs against the door. If there's windows, if you can cover the window, turn off lights. Now you want to be in that hiding mode where you don't want that shooter to know that you're in that room. If you have your cell phone, even take it off vibrate so it's completely silent. Make little to no noise at all. And then, again, you're in that hiding mode. You don't want that person to be able to get in there. And then take cover behind concealment. There's a difference between cover and concealment. Concealment is something solid, that if they were to breach that room and get in and they were to start shooting, are you behind a desk or something that's going to help protect and deflect bullets if at all possible. The next thing is you're going to have to fight, and you're going to have to be dynamic with this. You need to be quick. You need to improvise with weapons. Again, going back to the first part, when you're aware of your surroundings and you look, do you see a fire extinguisher? Do you see a desk perhaps with pens or pencils or scissors? Keeping in mind that if in fact this does happen and you have to fight, what can you grab?
In terms of run, hide, or fight, preferably you should do it in that order. So obviously try to run to the exit. If there are no exits available, try to find a good hiding spot, like inside a cabinet if there's one big enough, or like under a table or something. And if not, you should try to find a weapon nearby in order to fight if there's no other foreseeable way out of it.
Given the fight situation, if somebody is, like, say, 6'3", 300 pounds, a football player, they may not have quite the challenge as far as physically confronting whoever has the gun. But if it's somebody who's smaller, somebody who they're a little bit more petite, or it's a young lady, or somebody who would physically be at a disadvantage.
Size in this instance, that's why you look for weapons. Sure, it would be harder for somebody to, who's much larger or bigger, especially armed with a gun or some other weapon, to take them down. So you're aware, you're going to act quickly. So if that person does breach, maybe there's 3 or 4 of you that will do something. You each arm yourself with a chair, anything that you can. And if there's no weapons, then you develop a plan amongst yourselves to how you're going to attack the assailant when they come through that door. So the strength in numbers would be a huge obstacle too for that person to overcome. When someone's coming into a building or a place that you're at and they're actively firing and shooting at somebody, talking, I think, is out the window at that point. You really need to do something else. At that point, he or she has already shot multiple people, or at least attempted to. I'm not doing much talking.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to take some type of action. I wouldn't risk at that point, trying to humanize yourself to this person, because they've already shown that they don't care about human life. What we need them to do is as hard as it's going to be, is to try to stay calm. Once they're out, they need to take a few deep breaths, realize that, okay, now I'm in a position of safety here, and then try to relay information to us in as calm a fashion as possible under the circumstances. If they saw the shooter, we need them to provide as accurate of a description that they can provide, whether it be clothing, whether it be their skin tone, height, weight, whatever they can give us that would help us identify the actual threat would be fantastic. As police are coming there, what they need to do is follow the directions to a T. Some potential victims, or they may even be handcuffed, because if we're getting conflicting information and we don't know who the shooter is, we may be securing some people until we get it resolved. But following instructions when law enforcement arrives is paramount. If they're telling you come out with your hands up, come out with your hands up. They may ask you as a caller what kind of clothing you're wearing. The unlikelihood of the suspect actually calling in and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, it's rare. So you as a citizen or potential victim calling in, they may ask you, what are you wearing? So when we come there, we know that you're a good guy, essentially, not the assailant. So just comply with law enforcement, whatever they tell you to do. Come out with your hands up. Don't reach for anything. Don't make any sudden movements. Anything that's going to alarm the officer who's getting there in the situation, who's got to immediately take action, who wasn't there at the start of it.
If you were able to get out, you get as many people as possible out. Just always
Yeah.
Even though you're trying to make sure that you yourself and your family stay safe, even the strangers around you, if something like this is going on, try to help everybody.
I think it's always a good idea for families to get together now and talk about this. It's a shame that we have to, but it's definitely something that's real. It's something that happens anywhere today. So I think that it's very important for families to discuss certain scenarios and kind of not necessarily role play, but maybe again talk about, you know, if we're here in the movie theater and all of a sudden somebody starts shooting, how are we going to act? What are you going to do with your family to ensure their safety? And talk about the run, hide, fight.
Star Trek, Star Wars, and Comic-Con. Just a few places you can find extraterrestrial aliens. But are there real ETs in outer space? And would they live on a planet like Earth or a place more like the moon? When people think of extraterrestrials, I feel like they think of what they see in the movies, you know, these huge creatures coming in and with spaceships and all of this, and when really extraterrestrials could be any part of life outside of Earth. So it could be little bacteria or just any type of microscopic organisms. And I feel like that the thought of aliens gets really confused with people because they think of what they see in the movies because that's all they've ever heard of whenever they see aliens.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, one thing that a lot of scientists say that the reason to disprove extraterrestrial life is they try to say the planet would have to have almost like the exact same conditions that Earth has in terms of relation to the sun and biomes. Mm-hmm. You know, when reality could just be that the life's like just evolved differently to survive like that.
Yeah, because there's life in extreme conditions, like at the bottom of the ocean, where at the hydrothermal vents, where it's hundreds and hundreds of degrees, and then there's life in Antarctica where it's freezing. Mm-hmm. So I feel like you can't really tell, well, there can't be life there because of that, because you don't know. They could adapt and evolve and create life.
A lot of people think it's weird to think that there's life outside of Earth, but honestly, I don't think it would be that impossible because there's thousands of stars in a galaxy, and there's so many galaxies in the universe, so any one of those places could have life other than what we have on Earth.
Yeah, because where Earth is compared to the entire solar system, there has to be something out there, because for us just to be alone in this entire universe and galaxy or whatever is just, I can't fathom that. So I feel like even if it is just bacteria somewhere, I feel like there's definitely life somewhere else.
When we're looking for things outside of our own planet for potential worlds that have life, the first sign is obviously water. And from there, we look for organic compounds. Usually, when we talk, what exactly is organic? Organic is anything that composes of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, bonded together in these really long chains of bonds that make up these organic molecules. And those organic molecules mixed with water are really kind of how life emerged at, in early Earth. So we think that, being that carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are some of the most abundant elements in the universe, then clearly we know that if life started here then maybe life could have started elsewhere with those basic ingredients.
China, what they do is they recently just finished work on a project where they're basically going to send a probe up to space, and it's just designed to simply search for life, around different stars in the galaxy, just search for life.
See, I feel like if we keep coming up with more technology like that, we'll start to find more stuff that we're looking for to see if we're the only ones or if there really is something. But I feel like the more we need to be careful when we look too, because we might end up destroying their habitat or something like that. So I feel like the more we need to come up with more technology, but we also need to make sure we're not coming in there and destroying their world and just for our knowledge.
If we found that there was a world that has life, we could go there, or would they be able to contact with us? And if we discovered that life existed, maybe there might be intelligent life on that planet, it would take at least 100 years for us to send a transmission there, and for another 100 years to get back. So in our lifetimes, we probably wouldn't be able to actually truly communicate with them, unless they already sent a communication out before. And so what scientists are doing right now is not necessarily sending out, but actually trying to listen, because they think that if a intelligent alien race sent out something 1,000 years ago, maybe it might be intercepted by us, and once we intercept it, then we can say where is it coming from, and then we can go ahead and try to send something out.
The more we advance in our technology, the more we'll find out. Civil ceremonies and church weddings. These describe the legal and official union of two people who share their lives and responsibilities. Until recently, this union was restricted to heterosexual couples, and in 2015, the Supreme Court decided the right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples as well. But what is marriage equality, and why is it necessary, and when did the effort begin?
Back in 1965-64, 5 individuals protested the White House because of the way that the federal government prohibited homosexuals, which is how they like to use the term at the time, from being employed by the federal government. It was 4 men and 1 woman. They were protesting outside wearing coat and ties, or she was wearing a dress, and it was the very first time you'd ever had a public display of a protest. And that's really, if you want to go back, it was those people that had the guts to stand up and say, this is not right the way that you're treating gay people. One of the arguments that we kept making all along in trying to get marriage equality was that there were 1,132 benefits, both on the federal, state, and local levels, that we were not able to enjoy that any other straight married couple could. Mm-hmm. Once this law was declared, the banning of same-sex marriage or marriage equality was defeated by the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. A lot of those benefits became available, still not all. Things such as being able to file joint income tax, Social Security benefits, survivor benefits, things that you can do that you don't think about, burial benefits, if you can have the right to choose where or how your spouse will be buried. Benefits dealing with children, if you do have children that are adopted, or even that children that were the natural of one of the participants, do the rights of the others carry over to it? They have rights going to the schools for education purposes, to represent or call on the children. So it's a whole lot. Again, like it was over 1,100 rights.
I feel like whenever you hear the term same-sex marriage, you don't normally hear of the process or the time length that it takes for the couple to get the marriage license or to get the piece of paper that says you're officially married. You mostly hear of people saying, oh, I agree with it, I don't agree with it. You never really hear of the facts of what it takes to actually get married.
Yeah, because until recently it wasn't even legal in the United States, and people had to resort to domestic marriage licenses, which aren't the same as an official marriage license that a heterosexual couple could get.
Yeah, and after it became legalized, it started to become a lot more common per se. It started to become publicized a lot more in media. Shows like Modern Family, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Even as more TV shows come out with gay couples, it gives people more comfort outside in the real world. Like at school, I see couples that I would never think of. That's oh, I didn't know they like the same sex, and I think it's cool that it's giving people more opportunity to come out and be themselves and have that freedom to do whatever they want, and just if they like somebody, they like somebody. I don't think that before it became legalized, people always just felt confined and wanted to make everyone else happy, I feel like.
Yeah, because really when it comes to same-sex marriage or couples in general that are same-sex, it really shouldn't affect anyone besides those two people in the relationship.
I guess I've always thought it was funny how people were complaining and claiming that same-sex marriage was going to destroy the sanctity of marriage in our country. And I just kept thinking, if the fact that I'm married to my husband affects your marriage, you've got some issues you need to talk about, because what we do in our life should not affect you and yours. So, and so far we've had it again across the nation for over a year. We've had it here in Florida for about 2.5 years. And, the sky has not fallen. Society is still existing. And everybody's fears really have not come true. And basically, again, instead of calling it same-sex, and I'm doing it right now for descriptive purposes, it's still just marriage.
Like he said in the interview, what does my marriage affect your marriage? It doesn't. It's still the same. It's just two people who want to love each other and spend their lives together. It doesn't matter if it's same-sex or not. If they love each other, then they should be able to get married. And I'm so glad that this law passed, so now everybody can just be who they want and live whoever they want with. And even the marriages with a heterosexual or a homosexual relationship, the ceremonies can still be the same. It's still two people coming together, and you still have whoever's marrying you and the two people, and the ceremony is still basically the same. You still have your vows and you still make your promises, and it's still basically the same, which I think is good, because most people, I feel like, think it's so different and so just such a change. They don't think that it's still the same concept when it is. It's still two people coming together.
Yeah. I just think when it comes to same-sex marriage, people, if they're out or not, they just tend to conform. They might be interested in the same sex, and they feel obligated not to say it out loud, because until recently it was frowned upon, I guess. But now that it's legalized, a lot more people are willing to come out and express themselves how they see.
We had TV shows like Will and Grace and Ellen that came into the homes, and people started looking and realizing that gays were not the monsters they thought they were. And it made more and more gays feel comfortable to come out. So you started seeing people coming out, and they're learning that their sons, their daughters, their grandchildren, their neighbors, the person that works to them next to them, their church members, were gay. And that they've known them all along. They've been great people. All of a sudden, it wasn't such a big issue.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you two both went to public schools, right?
Yes.
So there are like there are same-sex public couples that are more common there, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because I go to a Catholic school, and there are people who are attracted to the same sex, but there aren't like that many couples there per se.
Yeah. Well, even at like my school, just with me, like growing up, I was raised very Southern and stuff like that. And it's not frowned upon, but it's not something it's used to. It's out of the norm. So I'm friends with a lot of, Southern people and stuff like that. And normally none of my friends aren't like attracted to the same-sex people, but a lot of my friends are starting to come out more because it's more common. And at school, I just see everybody walking around, and it seems like it's getting more popular. So I understand, like, you don't see it more, but if you went to a public school or something, you would definitely see it a lot more. It's more common.
I'm Mackenzie. Thank you for watching Our Voices.